It's the last part of this travel guitar build. In this section, I'm getting the headstock design traced out so we can cut out the shapes. I was building two at one time, a left-handed model and a right-handed model, but the left-handed model had some problems with the back cracking, and it was just putting me too far behind to try to keep fixing it. So I had to abandon the left-handed version and stick with the finishing this right-handed. And it actually starting to turn out a lot better since I focused on just one guitar at a time. Now we're gonna get the truss rod installed, and I'm doing it with hand tools because I didn't really want to set up the router and try to get that all dialed in. And plus, I really wanted to just practice the woodworking and the chiseling and getting a nice groove cut. So this is actually my third truss rod. The first one was a left-handed guitar version. That's okay, but the neck angle is off. And then the other left-handed guitar that failed, but this one's coming out okay. So we just carefully trace the groove. Instead of putting a nut on the end, I just bent it over and cut it off and stuck it into the neck, and that holds it in place when you turn it. And just working with what I have on hand. And I use a Sharpie on the drill instead of a piece of tape because the tape gets the flapping and it moves up and down, but you can see the black line when the drill was spinning. And then I use a scalpel to start the cut and then go in with the chisels and start grooving it out. Didn't take too long. So for the sound holes, I use hole drilling drill bits, kind of like a doorknob drill bit. I have a set with various sizes, and I printed the label from GIMP, which is a free Photoshop-like software, and just glue it down with a little touch of Titebond and glue the top on. Now we're going to use this fret jig. There's a single edge razor sticking up on the bottom, and the idea is to use a pre-existing slotted fretboard and tape your fretboard blank on top of it, and then you register the fret slots over that single edge razor, and you'll cut the frets exactly where they need to go. Just be sure that the end is lined up where the nut goes. And you tape them together and you pop it in and you lock it to the fret slot. And make sure you clamp the board down. And then cut your fret slots. I learned how to build this jig from the Brian Forbes acoustic guitar making book. There's a lot of helpful tips in this book. I'll put a link in the description. And I use catalogs from Hibden Hardwoods for the fretboard. Now I'm going to use a trim router to knock down the edge of the top that got glued on. Then I'm using that Japanese rasp to smooth down the edges, and another ride on the belt sander. Now we're using a rabbet bit for the binding slot and get that tortoiseshell binding glued in there. And now we're shaping up the neck. You cut your basic shape on either end, and then you cut away the rest that doesn't look like a guitar deck. And here I'm using a radius block to get a bit of a neck radius on that fretboard. This is the first time I'm trying that. And then I clean up the fret slots that were already cut. Since I sanded down the radius, you want to make sure the grooves are deep enough. And we clean it out. And I use a little super glue and pop it in there and trim it and keep going. It's always time for a party. The last fret. And hopefully I've got enough practice and get this in without too much trouble. On this shot, I was chipping off the little piece, the little square I'm going to use for the fret marker, and it flew off onto the floor and had to go get it. So on the next one, I learned my lesson. I put a little piece of tape on it before I split it, and this way you hang on to it. I'm going to use this as my guide for making my tailpiece. The Archtop Guitar by Robert Benedetto. It's one of my favorite books. I've learned so much. Where is it? The Fittings, Tailpiece 245. There we go. So I'll follow this and then get the size that works for my travel guitar. Because this one is going to be too long, his measurements, but it's the same idea. We'll cut it out of a piece of hardwood and then get it to fit on the tail so we can string it up. Ooh, can't do it on the bandsaw because this is too tall to fit under the foot. So we'll do it by hand with the pull saw. Well, what do you know? I'm using the violin tailpiece as a reference so I can get an idea of how I'm going to add the little cable that ties to the end pin. I actually used a guitar string, like a D, a middle gauge guitar string I tied to the end of the block. So we cut the grooves in it, and I glued a little block for a fulcrum, which was suggested in the book. And now you got to tie the guitar string on there. And I used an old chair spindle. It was from a broken Windsor's chair, and I made a little end pin out of that. And I just carved it. I don't have a lathe. So I cut a pretty good circle and got it tuned in, and shave it off and keep trying to fit it, and then finally it got in there. So I used a piece of walnut for the saddle. It's what I had on hand, and it was easy to work with as I sort out my bridge design. And you trace the contour of the top, like the bottom of that piece of wood is flat, and then I trace the contour so I can get the dome shape on the bridge, kind of like you would when you make arch top bridges. Ooh, it's a pretty good start. We still got a huge gap here, but now we're getting an idea of how much we got to come down. Yeah, we still got to come down about 2 or 3 millimeters. But that's a good starting point. I'm going to leave it and get it rough shape. I used these on another guitar, and they worked really well, and they're not super expensive. Far enough in, but not too close to the edge. I have this little factory net we use it for temp. Just get the tuners on, throw some strings on it for a little rough test. Oh, the Forbidden Song. This is my guitar shop. I could play that if I want. I think we're finally going to wrap up this video. I strung it up roughly, with a factory bridge I had from another broken guitar. We'll pop the tuners on it. This tail piece is working out pretty good. And I got the angle right that I wanted to be coming off the bridge. And it's tuned to like a D. It's a 27-inch scale, so it's more of a baritone guitar because I don't want to put too much tension on those long strings. And it has kind of a cool sound. So what I need to do next, and to wrap it up, is I'm going to shape the neck a little more because it's a little boxy right here. These corners are just a little flat, so I want to round it just a bit more and it'll be a little more comfortable. I'm going to lower the action to match the radius of the neck and make a new nut. I have a blank right here. And that's it. Those four things. I need to level and crown the frets too. Final setup on this travel guitar. And we look right in here at the 12th fret. 12th fret. I want to be about 2 millimeters. Right now I'm closer to 4, about 3.5. We'll come down to about there. And that should be good enough. The high E is super high. We want to get right at 2, maybe a little below, and that'll be good. And then we'll come up and do the nut after. The travel guitar is done. It turned out pretty well. I adapted the plans to give it a neck angle, a taller saddle bridge, and a tailpiece based on the archtop guitar design. And it's a longer scale, it's 27-inch scale, so it's a baritone guitar. So this is actually a D chord. So it's tuned to D, G, C, F, A, D. And if you want to play in standard tuning, you pop a capo on the 2nd fret. And now we're in. This is all scratch built from wood I had around the shop. Some mahogany and walnut, some cedar and walnut veneer for the back. The top and back are walnut. The saddle is also walnut. The fretboard is Catalox from the Hibden Hardwood store. And it's a bone nut. The inlay the binding is this tortoise shell stuff I got from LMI. And then for the inlay, I did just little squares of the binding that was left over for the fret markers. And that's it.